Welcome to the Daily Insider here on Vegas Insider. I am Kevin Rogers, and a lot to get to today here on Wednesday, December 1st. That's right. We turn the calendar from November to December. Got a lot to talk about. A lot of college basketball, ACC Big Ten Challenge continuing tonight. Also NBA. Got to hit on that Suns-Warriors game from last night. Phoenix continues to stay hot. And also we'll look at the two college football championship games for Friday. Conference USA, Texas San Antonio taking on Western Kentucky, and the Pac-12 championship out in Vegas between Oregon and Utah. We'll talk about both those games coming up in just a little bit. But before we get to all of that, first order of business, BetMGM. You know who they are. I talk about them all the time here on the Daily Insider. They are the king of sportsbooks and a great deal for new players only. Bet $10 to win $200 if your team scores a touchdown. Bet on any NFL money line. And if your team scores a touchdown, you'll receive an additional $200 in free bets. Again, for new players only, must be 21 years or older. And it's legal in the following states: Arizona, New Jersey, Indiana, Colorado, Tennessee, West Virginia, Iowa, Virginia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Washington, D.C. only. That is BetMGM. They are the king of sportsbooks. All right. Let's talk NBA. Last night, you had a pretty good matchup, to say the least, between the Warriors and the Suns. And after a bit of a back-and-forth start between the two teams, Phoenix ends up pulling away, and they grab the 104-96 win over Golden State. So Phoenix now 17 consecutive wins for the Suns, which is crazy. Devin Booker left with a hamstring injury. We'll see what his status is moving forward. But when you look at what this game had, I guess in a sense, Golden State and Phoenix put up a bunch of points in the first quarter. And then things really slowed down after that, especially for Golden State. Steph Curry struggled from the floor. And a big win for the Phoenix Suns because they started the season at 1-3. And now they've won 17 in a row. Everyone thought, oh, it's a NBA Finals hangover, and the Suns, you know, they had their one window. They had a 2-0 lead over Milwaukee, lost 4 straight in the finals. Now teams like the Lakers are going to come back. The Clippers eventually get Kawhi. They'll come back. Even you throw Utah in. But Phoenix, they have not yet given up the throne. They are the defending Western Conference champions. And Golden State, after scoring 35 in the first quarter, they put up 19, 24, and 18 in the final 3 quarters. Steph Curry is 4 of 21, 3 of 14 from three-point range. He scores only 12 points in the defeat. Big game for DeAndre Ayton. He had 24. Even though Devin Booker left with injury, Phoenix still picked him up, and they end up getting the victory over Golden State. So these two teams, the top ones in the Pacific Division, and the Suns win it 104-96. And the game easily stays under the total of 222.5. So a good job there by the Phoenix Suns among the games last night in the NBA. Also, Memphis picks up a big win at Toronto. The Raptors have been terrible this season at home. Also, Portland beats Detroit without Damian Lillard. Lakers beat the Kings without LeBron. And the Nets held off the Knicks. New York did cover, but the Nets did beat the Knicks. Another close game between those two. It feels like that's the way it's been for the last several meetings between these two teams. Now let's look ahead to tonight in the NBA. And let's begin with the Timberwolves and the Wizards. They meet up in Washington, and the Minnesota Timberwolves are a team that have played they've been very impressive, to say the least. And Minnesota, they are right now a 3.5-point dog at Washington. The Timberwolves at 11-10 so far on the season. And when you look back at what they've done, they have won now 7 of their past 8 games, which is very, very good. And they held off Indiana on Monday night. They've won at Philadelphia during the stretch. I know some of the victories aren't against great teams: Sacramento, San Antonio, New Orleans. They did get blown out by Charlotte, but they did win at Philadelphia in overtime, a double overtime, in fact. And Minnesota right now playing very well. They face the Wizards, who are back home after a 4-game road trip closed out by a loss at San Antonio back 2 nights ago. And Washington, after their hot start. They've been a bit up and down of late, but they've also played a lot of road games lately. 7-2 at home for the Wizards. And Minnesota, got to give them a lot of credit that right now they are playing very well, and they are at 11-10 so far on the season. Taking a look at some of the other action inside the NBA tonight, the Hawks and the Pacers, they meet up in Indiana, and the Pacers have fallen on some hard times recently, 9-14. They picked up a nice backdoor cover against Minnesota 2 nights ago, in case you missed it. In fact, Indiana was winning just about that whole game against Minnesota. Timberwolves came back, took the lead, and they had a 4-point lead in the final seconds. Pacers made a layup at the buzzer to get the cover to lose by 2, which was pretty good. Now, Atlanta, they had been pretty bad on the road to begin the season. 1-8 their first 9 away from State Farm Arena, but they have won their last 2 on the road at San Antonio and at Memphis, both in impressive fashion, both by double digits. So good job there by the Hawks. And for Indiana, they started slow, went on a run, but right now they've lost their last 2 to Milwaukee and Minnesota, scoring 198 in those 2 games. And you see a total of 217.5. And the Pacers right now a short favorite over the Hawks tonight in Indiana. The Nuggets continue their trip through Florida after beating the Heat a few nights ago. Now they face the Magic, and Denver laying 7.5 here against Orlando, and that total at 208.5. The Magic at 4-18 so far in the season, and 9-13 against the spread. It seemed like Orlando was going on a nice run. They had covered 3 straight earlier in November. Right now, 2-3 ATS their last 5, but look at what they're getting each of these games. 14 they covered at Philadelphia, got 10.5 at Cleveland and lost, got 10 at home to Chicago and lost, got 7.5 at home to Charlotte, lost by 7, got 13.5 at Milwaukee, 12.5 at Milwaukee, 9.5 at Brooklyn, 11.5 at New York, 10.5 at Atlanta. So basically in their last 9 games, they've been a double-digit dog 7 times. And now they're a single-digit dog here against Denver. And Orlando also had a 5-game under streak too, so you see that number pretty low. Denver, meanwhile, 5 straight overs for them. They won at Miami, and that put a halt to a nice skid. Also helped that Nikola Jokic came back, because Jokic was out for a bit of time. Michael Porter's out now for probably the rest of the season for Denver. So the Nuggets dealing with a lot of injuries. Jamal Murray still hasn't played yet, and the Nuggets, they're laying 7.5 against the Magic. Now, 76ers face the Celtics tonight, and Boston right now laying 2.5 at BetMGM. Some places now it's up to 3. And the Celtics and the 76ers have not played yet this season. You know, those 2 old rivals that, look, both 11-10, right there behind Brooklyn inside the Atlantic Division. And Philadelphia last season took all 3 meetings from Boston. So now they're meeting for the first time. And the 76ers off that 5-point win over the Magic back a few nights ago. Boston, they snapped a 2-game slide by beating Toronto back on Sunday. But the Celtics, though, 5-4 at home. It hasn't been that impressive playing at TD Garden. And the Celtics, you look at some of the teams they've beaten. They beat the Rockets and Thunder. Yeah, they beat the Lakers when LeBron came back. They beat Milwaukee. So it's just been a very up-and-down season for Boston right now in this first year after Brad Stevens left to go into the front office of the Celtics, and Ime Udoka took over as the head coach. So it's taken some time, and Jaylen Brown's been hurt. But Boston, after a bit of a slow start right now, above 500. And the 76ers were dealing with Joel Embiid being sidelined. He's back now, and Ben Simmons not playing. So both those teams are trying to figure everything out. The Cavaliers and the Heat, they hook up tonight in Miami. And the Cavs, again, one of the biggest surprises so far in the league, just being at 11-10 and 14-7 against the spread. They blew out Dallas back on Monday. They've covered 4 in a row. They went on this huge ATS hot streak and then failed to cover in 4 straight. Now they've covered in 4 straight. And they're dealing with a lot of injuries. Colin Sexton, he's out. And the Cavaliers finally got Evan Mobley back in the lineup after he was dealing with an injury. Jared Allen, their center, he has been outstanding for them this season. 16 points, 11 rebounds a game. So automatic double-double, 4 straight double-doubles for him. And the Cavaliers, they're putting it together. Lauri Markkanen was a nice pickup from the Bulls. Ricky Rubio, he showed some flashes off the bench for the Cavs, and they continue to play well. The Heat, meanwhile, off that loss to Denver, they've been up and down of late, and they're dealing with injuries. Jimmy Butler didn't play on Monday in the loss to Denver. Bam Adebayo was back. He had 24 points and 13 rebounds. Tyler Hero's supposed to come back tonight for the Heat, but it's just been a complete roller coaster for the Heat. They're 1-4 against the spread in their last 5, and they're laying 5.5 here against the Cavaliers. The Hornets and the Bucks in Milwaukee, and all of a sudden now the Bucks, after they had a bit of a slow start to the season, you could say, all right, NBA championship hangover, however you want to phrase it. But Milwaukee, they have come back to life, though, of late. They've won 7 in a row. And in those wins, they're winning a lot of them by double digits. They had a 7-point win over Oklahoma City, a 7-point win over the Lakers, a 9-point win over Orlando. But since then, they've won by over 30, 20, 11, 18. So Milwaukee has really come back into form, while Charlotte, they are off a back-to-back losses at Houston and at Chicago. And that was after a run in which Charlotte had won 7 of 8. So the Hornets taking a step back a little bit here, and the Hornets, they had that Houston loss, which is a bit inexcusable, 146-143 in overtime. They've gotten a lot of overs. We know that they're an over team. Charlotte 13-10. Milwaukee's at 14-7 to the under so far in the season. Also, Charlotte's got to do a little better job on the road, 6-8 away from Spectrum Center. And look, Milwaukee's playing a lot better recently, but the Bucks laying 8.5 in this one tonight against the Hornets. Mavericks and the Pelicans tonight from New Orleans, or let's say New Orleans, I meant Charlotte. Excuse me. They all come together because New Orleans was in the Hornets were in New Orleans for a long time. And then Michael Jordan got the name back and decided to quit on the Bobcats. All right, Dallas at New Orleans tonight. And the Pelicans actually playing a little better of late. 6-17. Doesn't sound great, but they've won 3 of 4. Beat the Clippers, Jazz, and Wizards during that span. So that's a good job by them. They covered 3 times. And now they get Dallas, who has gone backwards. They've dropped 5 of 6, only when coming in overtime against the Clippers, off back-to-back home losses to the Wizards and the Cavs. So now Dallas will try to bounce back. They play New Orleans on a home-and-home. They play again on Friday night in Dallas. So the Pelicans, who are on the road for 3, they come home for 1, and then back on the road for 2 at Dallas and at Houston. And the Mavericks, they're just trying to get back on track because they were looking good for a bit. Now they've kind of hit the skids for just a few games, and Dallas did beat New Orleans at home earlier this season. So Dallas will try to beat the Pelicans again. The Rockets and the Thunder, mercifully, this is their last meeting of the season. They've already played 3 times. This is their 4th meeting already by December 1st, and they're done with each other. Houston at 4-16, Oklahoma City at 6-14. And the Rockets right now dealing with injuries. Jalen Green, he's hurt. So that's not a good sign for the Rockets. But they did beat the Thunder a few nights ago, 102-89. And Houston pretty much in control of that game. The 2 teams have stayed under the total in all 3 meetings. So another total here in that same range. Houston has won 3 straight. Houston was once 1-16. Now they're 4-16. The Thunder, meanwhile, they going into that game on Monday, they had covered 6 in a row. That was their first ATS loss in 7 games. So the Rockets, they're heating up a bit. Oklahoma City has now lost 8 of 9. So Rockets, positive trending. Thunder going backwards. But Oklahoma City laying 2.5 here at home. Rockets are 0-11 so far this season on the road. Let's look at the last game inside of the NBA tonight. And it's the Kings and the Clippers. Sacramento lost at home to the Lakers last night without LeBron. And that was, in a sense, a revenge game for the Lakers after they lost in overtime to the Kings a few nights ago. Sacramento now has dropped 2 straight since winning 2 in a row. and the offense not really there. 101 against Memphis in a blowout, 92 against the Lakers last night. Clippers, meanwhile, they've dropped a few in a row, falling to the Warriors and the Pelicans back-to-back at Staples Center. Clippers now 0-4 ATS the last 4, 1-6 ATS the last 7. So it's not been a good run for the Clippers. Sacramento, they are just 2-6 ATS their last 8 games. They get the Clippers coming up again in a few days back at Golden One Center. And last season, when these teams met, Clippers took 2 of 3. So first meeting between these teams on the season, and Clippers right now 7.5-point favorite at home. Before we look at college basketball, we want to take a moment and tell you about WynnBET and the WynnBET mobile sportsbook app. When you download the WynnBET mobile sportsbook app and you're a new patron, you can download on iOS or Android devices. When you download the WynnBET mobile sportsbook app and you're a new patron, you can get a $1,000 risk-free first bet with a $20 minimum first deposit and eligible sports bet when you use the promo code VI bonus. That means if you lose your first wager, you get it back up to $1,000 as a free bet credit that you can use for another bet. The WynnBET promo code will expire soon. To make sure to grab it while you can, that is the WynnBET mobile sportsbook app. Must be 21 years or older to play. Terms and conditions apply. And it is legal in the following states: Colorado, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Tennessee, Virginia, and Arizona. That is the WynnBET mobile sportsbook app. All right, let's now take a look at college basketball for this evening. And a couple of the big games inside the ACC Big Ten Challenge. Last night, Duke gets upset by Ohio State. Duke was up at the half, and you figured, all right, well, since the Blue Devils had just beaten Gonzaga, no hangover. That wasn't the case. Ohio State, they rallied back and they beat Duke, so we'll have a new number 1 next week, likely Purdue. And a lot of college basketball tonight. We'll focus on some of these games. Louisville and Michigan State. They meet up tonight in East Lansing, and let's see what Mr. Izzo has in store for the Cardinals. And Michigan State right now laying 3.5 in this game. And the Spartans, 5-2 so far in the season. Louisville comes in at 5-1. And Louisville, who came in, remember they lost to Furman earlier this year in overtime? They've bounced back with 4 straight victories, including a win over Maryland. So that's impressive. Now they get another Big Ten school. Michigan State, they had a tournament that was not easy. They lost at the beginning of the season to Kansas. They beat Loyola Chicago. Good win. They beat Connecticut. Good win. But then they got blown out by Baylor. Baylor's the defending champions, even though they lost a couple pieces from last year. Still, Baylor's an excellent team. So Michigan State trying to rebound from that, and they're hosting Louisville here tonight. And last time these teams met was back in 2018 in the ACC Big Ten Challenge. Louisville won as a home dog, 82-78 in overtime. So Izzo and the Spartans facing off with Louisville tonight. Let's take a look at now the other games inside of college basketball. And let's get to Virginia Tech and Maryland. And the Terrapins, it always feels to me when you see Maryland play an ACC team that's still an ACC matchup, that it's not Maryland. I know they've been in the Big Ten for a very long time, but I went to Florida State when Maryland was in the ACC, and they had Steve Blake and Juan Dixon and Lonnie Baxter and Gary Williams as the head coach. I always think of Maryland as an ACC team. It's just so hard for me to think of them really in the Big Ten. It's been a long time they've been in the Big Ten. But I always think of them as an ACC team. So they're playing Virginia Tech, who I still think was a Big East team. And both of them are 5-2 meeting up tonight in College Park. And I just mentioned that loss Maryland had to Louisville. And that's the second loss of the season for the Terrapins. They also lost at home to George Mason. Virginia Tech, they got off to a really good start. They were 5-0, but they've lost 2 straight, falling to Memphis and Xavier. So Virginia Tech will try to get back on track. Only issue with Virginia Tech is they really haven't played, or I shouldn't say played, they haven't really beaten great competition so far on the season. And Virginia Tech, they beat Maine and Navy and Radford. I know Navy beat Virginia. but St. Francis, Pennsylvania, Merrimack. Then they played some better teams and they ended up losing. So we'll see how that turns out tonight when the Hokies face the Terrapins in College Park. Now, the last game we'll look at, Michigan and North Carolina. That's right. You think of Chris Webber with this and the timeout, don't you, when these teams hook up? But Michigan got off to a very good start, or at least, let me rephrase that. There was a lot of high expectations for Juwan Howard's team. And Michigan right now at 4-2. Carolina's also at 4-2. The Wolverines, they lost that game to Seton Hall at home by 2. They lost against Arizona in Vegas by 18. They beat Tarleton State by 11. So far, Michigan just 2-4 against the spread in their 6 games. Now, granted, in some of those games, they were laying double digits, but also they were laying 3.5 to Arizona, lost by 18. They were laying 8 to Seton Hall and lost by 2. And they've beaten UNLV, Prairie View, Buffalo. So Buffalo's all right, but still not any great wins. Now they go to play Carolina in Chapel Hill. And North Carolina, Hubert Davis now the head coach. Roy's gone. So Carolina, they are 0-6 against the spread so far on the season. 0-6 ATS for Roy, or I said Roy Williams is gone, for Hubert Davis. It's been so long. But Carolina, they've lost to Purdue. They've lost to Tennessee. Those are only 2 outright losses. The wins, Loyola Maryland, Brown, College of Charleston, and North Carolina Asheville. So really not wins against great teams. They've lost both times as a dog. And they haven't covered in any of the times as a heavy favorite. Now you get them as a dog against. You wonder if that trend is going to keep going with North Carolina, considering they haven't covered a game yet this year, and they are 0-6 against the spread overall. Now I want to transition to the 2 college football games on Friday night, the championship games. Let's start with Western Kentucky and Texas San Antonio. And this game is very interesting for a lot of reasons. One, because it seemed like Texas San Antonio, I don't think anybody really had them winning the conference before the season started. But they got off to the 11-0 start. They lost the final game of the season to North Texas, who actually played very well to close out the season. But the Roadrunners, though, they're 0-3 ATS their last 3 games. Now, when you look at Western Kentucky, they won 7 straight to close the season. And they've covered their last 5. Big win over Marshall this past weekend to get into the Conference USA title. They won the Conference USA East division. But when I look at what these teams have done, Western Kentucky and Texas San Antonio. Now, Western Kentucky did lose to UTSA at home, 52-46 back in early October. Now, looking at some of the opponents they played, when you look at the Hilltoppers, they beat Marshall, who finished 5-3 in the conference, but also FAU was 3-5. Now, these are all conference numbers. FAU was 3-5. Rice was 3-5. Middle Tennessee was 4-4. Charlotte was 3-5. FIU was 0-8. Old Dominion was 5-3, but Old Dominion had lost 4 straight prior to playing Western Kentucky, and then Old Dominion went on a run to close out the season. Now, UTSA, they beat Western Kentucky, who was 7-1. They beat UAB, who was 6-2. North Texas, they lost to, who was 5-3. Beat UTEP, who was 4-4. Beat Southern Miss, who was 2-6. Louisiana Tech, who was 2-6. Middle Tennessee was 4-4, and Rice, who was 3-5. So, yes, UTSA beat a little better competition inside the conference. Also, UTSA, they faced UAB. Western Kentucky faced Marshall, if you want to call that a push. But the money's come on Western Kentucky. And their quarterback, Bailey Zapp, he throws the ball a lot. It's like 450, 500 yards a game they have through the air. But Texas San Antonio playing at home, this is going to be a very big game for them, trying to win their first ever Conference USA title. So we'll see if that's the case. Now, the Pac-12 coming up on Friday night, Utah and Oregon, and they play out in Las Vegas at Allegiant Stadium. And for Utah, they've already beaten Oregon once this year. So now let's see if they can do it again And Utah's a short favorite here, 2.5. The Ducks coming off the Civil War win over Oregon State. 2 weeks ago, the game at Utah, Utes won 38-7. They were up 28-0 at the half. And that also included a punt return for a touchdown for Utah. The Utes rushed for 200-plus yards. Oregon's offense really couldn't get going. Anthony Brown had 231 yards passing. I mean, Utah didn't really throw the ball. I mean, they only had 178 yards passing. But there was a big game on the ground for Tavion Thomas. He had 3 touchdown runs for the Utes. And Utah now, with that win, well, I mean, they finished 9-3, so they're not going to be in the playoff discussion. But losing early on to Oregon State and San Diego State, that kind of hurt them. But Utah's closed out the season playing well. Oregon's definitely going to kick themselves because they won at Ohio State, but they lost to Stanford. Lost to Stanford in overtime, and that pretty much was the killer to their season as far as getting to the college football playoff. I highly doubt that Oregon, with the win here, gets in. The only way they get in, now I'm just thinking about this out loud. Georgia's in regardless. Doesn't matter what they do, Georgia's in. Alabama, Michigan, Cincinnati control their own fate. They all win, they're in, there's your 4. Michigan loses, they're out. Cincy loses, they're out. Alabama loses. I feel like Alabama can still get in because of their name. But if, let's just say, Michigan and Cincinnati lose, now you got 2 more spots to fill. And does Oklahoma State sneak in? Does Notre Dame sneak in? Notre Dame doesn't have a game this weekend. They don't have a coach either. But do they sneak in? So there's a lot of moving pieces here. You have basically one team that's guaranteed, and it's Georgia. Everyone else has got to take care of their business to get in. Or if they lose, then who knows? But Oregon, after, man, they beat Ohio State handily. And for them to lose to Stanford, I mean, losing to Utah, there's no shame in that. But to lose to Stanford is just, that's the killer. Absolute killer for them. So that's the look at what we have for college football. We'll do more college football talk for the Saturday games coming up a little later in the week. Vince Aiken's expected to join us coming up tomorrow to break down some of the college football and NFL trends. And we have Cowboys Saints tomorrow night as well to kick off Week 13 in the NFL. But before we exit here, BetMGM, you know who they are. They're the king of sportsbooks. And the deal for new players only, bet $10 to win $200 if your team scores a touchdown. That's right, bet on any NFL money line. And if your team scores a touchdown, you'll receive an additional $200 in free bets. Must be 21 years or older to participate. New players only and legal in the following states: Arizona, New Jersey, Indiana, Colorado, Tennessee, West Virginia, Iowa, Virginia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Washington, D.C. only. Full terms and conditions apply. That is BetMGM. They are the king of sports books. All right. I appreciate you tuning into today's episode of the Daily Insider. A lot of college basketball, a lot of NBA tonight. Also, we have several NHL games I didn't hit on, but we have that too. So, as always, I wish you best of luck with your bets. We'll talk to you tomorrow at noon Eastern, right here on the Daily Insider on Vegas Insider.